Hello there and welcome to this revision video on how to answer question 6A and 6B on the Elizabethans for OCR B GCSE History. So for question 6 you will need to read a historical interpretation, and there are two questions to answer, a part A and a part B, with part A being worth 3 marks and part B being worth 5 marks. The whole point of question 6A is to identify the way a historian puts across their view, or an interpretation puts across a view. So we'll just read this question. In interpretation A, the historian argues that most people in Elizabethan England did not share the views of the Puritans about dancing. Identify and explain one way in which she does this. And then 6B, which quite often people can find quite tricky. You need to think about, if you were going to do some further research, what would you choose to investigate? So I'll read the question. It says, if you were asked to do further research on one aspect of interpretation A, what would you choose to investigate? Explain how this would help us to analyse and understand popular culture in Elizabethan England. So you want to start off by decoding the question. So that means to highlight the key parts of it. So the question says, as we've seen, interpretation A, the historian argues that most people in Elizabethan England did not share the views of the Puritans about dancing. Identify and explain one way in which he does this. So the question gives you the overall impression that you get from this interpretation, the idea that most people in Elizabethan England did not share the views of the Puritans about dancing. So you need to identify how she puts across her view in this historical interpretation. So what you want to try and do is highlight the impression interpretation gives you, and just remember you need to identify and explain. So as you, the way to do this question is to make sure you've read the question first, and then you see the bit we've highlighted there, that's the impression the interpretation gives. You are then looking, as you read the interpretation, for how the historian creates the impression that most people in Elizabethan England did not share the views of the Puritans about dancing. So what you want to do as you're reading the interpretation is underline and highlight any key quotes that help you with this. So let's just read the interpretation. So it's an extract from an article by the historian Mary Penino Baskerville, published in 1991, and she says, "It is no exaggeration to say that Elizabethan England was gripped by a dance mania that claimed highborn and low, urban and rural, young and old. While commoners danced their Morris dances and jigs, the nobles danced their elegant dances, prompting one visitor from Germany to remark that the English excel in dancing and music. However, not all those who observed the enthusiasm of the English for dancing did so with admiration. Puritan moralists criticised dance on several counts, for the injuries it caused, leading to lost work, for the social and economic problems it caused, and especially for the moral threat it posed. This hardly served to endear them to the population." So what you want to do as you read the interpretation, as I've got for you on this example, is highlight any key quotes from the interpretation that support the impression most people in Elizabethan England did not share the views of the Puritans about dancing. So things that I've highlighted here are the phrase gripped by a dance mania. The use of the word gripped is very suggestive that people are really passionate about the dancing. When it says claimed highborn and low, urban and rural, young and old, the historian is giving emphasis and really stressing the fact that there are lots of different types of people that love dancing, and therefore that suggests that most people did not share the views of the Puritans about dancing, which are explained in the second paragraph, the fact that the Puritans were against dancing. Another good quote is that a visitor from Germany remarked that the English excel in dancing and music. So the fact that a visitor from abroad has noticed this about the English suggests that people in England enjoy dancing, and the fact that they excel, they are good at dancing, suggests that they enjoy doing it. So there's 3 different examples of how the historian builds that impression within their answer. So what you need to do for this question is identify how the author puts across the view, and then explain and elaborate on how they're able to put across this view. This is quite similar to what you might do in some of your English language work, and you can see there I've colour coded where the answer is doing the different bits. Think about how choice of words affects meaning. What's the impact of choice of words? If it's an artistic interpretation, what impression do you get from the imagery that's chosen? Why has the author chosen to portray something in a particular way? So this example answer would get 3 out of 3. So it starts off, the historian emphasized that most people in Elizabethan England did not share the views of Puritans about dancing by showing how popular it was by using the phrase gripped by a dance mania. So you see that's one of the quotes we highlighted before. So putting a quote in here is really, really good. So you would get, probably 1 mark for doing that. And then what you need to do is you need to explain and elaborate what's the effect of this. So the use of the word gripped and mania suggests that people really enjoy dancing or are enthralled by it. This has the effect of emphasizing just how much people enjoy it. So that would therefore take you up to 3 marks out of 3. You only need to explain one way in which the historian does this, so you don't need to have several examples. What you really need to do is do some really good analysis about the impact of a choice of image or a choice of language within the answer. So that's how you do question 6A. Now, when you get 2-part questions like this, like a 6A and 6B, it's because the 2 questions are linked together. So if you have a look at this question, you really need to practice how to answer this question and to get into the habit of how to actually approach it. It's often a question that people find difficult, but actually once you get into the good habit of how to tackle this question, it's actually really, really doable, and it's really accessible question to get full marks on. So the question says, if you were asked to do further research on one aspect of interpretation A, what would you choose to investigate? Explain how this would help us to analyse and understand popular culture in Elizabethan England. Now, one thing to say here is that you don't have to actually answer this question. You are just thinking, as a historian, what would you like to find out more about? What kind of questions does this interpretation throw up that a historian might want to find out more about? Now, what's really crucial is to that they will always direct you about a particular aspect to find out about. So in this case, it's how would this help us to analyse and understand popular culture? So you've really got to make sure that whatever further area of research you would say that you would answer, that really links in with popular culture. So a checklist for this question: explain what impression you get from interpretation A using your answer in 6A to help you, and that's the part that you would do further research on. Explain what you're going to inquire into, and also it's a good practice to actually write out an inquiry question, and that should always be linked to a second order concept. Now, we know what good inquiry questions are, and we have them throughout our history curriculum. So a good inquiry question is one that really links into second order concepts like cause and consequence, similarity and difference, change and continuity, for example. And then the last part of the answer, explain how it would help a historian to find out more linked to popular culture. So we'll just have a look at an example answer here for question 6B. So begin by saying interpretation A gives us the impression that dancing was a popular pastime when it says England was gripped by a dance mania. So that's your starting point. So you're very much using your ideas from question 6A to help you there. I would investigate the types of dances there were, apart from Morris dances and jigs, and what other pastimes people had, such as going to the theatre, such as theatres. I would choose the inquiry question: was dancing the most popular pastime in Elizabethan England? That's a good inquiry question. It links the idea of similarity and difference. And then, so you've done those first 2 parts of the question, and then how would it help a historian find out more? Well, this would help a historian to understand more about popular culture and the extent to how popular other pastimes were, such as the theatre or maypole dancing, for example. Okay, so that's how you would do a question like that. So there you have it. There's a short video on how to answer questions 6A and 6B on the Elizabethans course. Thanks very much for listening.